Join me as we journey into the shadows, exploring the lives and crimes of 10 of the most notorious criminals in history.
Deep in the heart of Colombia, amidst the lush green slopes of the Andes Mountains, a different kind of empire was born, built on cocaine, violence, and fear. At its heart was Pablo Escobar, rising from humble beginnings to a ruthless drug lord. He exploited the insatiable appetite for cocaine in the United States, transforming Medellin into the cocaine capital of the world. The Medellin cartel operated with brutal efficiency, controlling the trade from the Andes to Miami and New York. In the end, his empire crumbled around him.
The streets of 1920s Chicago echoed with the clatter of Tommy guns and the screech of tires as rival gangs battled for control of a city awash in illegal liquor. At the heart of this turbulent world stood Al Capone, a man whose name became synonymous with the violence and corruption of the Prohibition era. Capone, a cunning and ruthless operator, rose through the ranks of the Chicago outfit, a powerful criminal organization that profited immensely from the illegal alcohol trade. His rise to power was marked by a chilling disregard for human life. He eliminated his rivals with brutal efficiency, earning a reputation as a man who would stop at nothing to protect his empire. His nickname, Scarface, was a constant reminder of the violence that swirled around him, a badge of honor in the brutal underworld he ruled. However, Capone's reign of terror could not last forever. His conviction for tax evasion marked the end of an era, a symbol of the inevitable fall from grace that awaits even the most powerful of criminals.
From the desolate mountains of Afghanistan, a new threat emerged, one that would change the course of history and cast a long shadow over the 21st century. This was the age of global terrorism, and at its forefront stood Osama bin Laden, the architect of terror, the mastermind behind Al-Qaeda. Born into a wealthy Saudi family, bin Laden seemed an unlikely candidate to become the world's most wanted man. Yet, his path was shaped by a potent mix of radical ideology, anti-Western sentiment, and a burning desire to establish a global Islamic caliphate. The world watched in horror on September 11, 2001, as Al-Qaeda's meticulously planned attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon unfolded. In a daring raid in 2011, U.S. Navy SEALs stormed his compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan, killing bin Laden and bringing an end to his reign of terror.
The mountains of Sinaloa, Mexico, have long been a haven for outlaws, a place where the writ of the law struggles to reach. Guzman's nickname, El Chapo, meaning Shorty, belied his towering influence in the narcotics world. He rose from humble beginnings, a farmer's son, to become a billionaire drug lord, his empire built on cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine, his reach extending from the Americas to Europe and beyond. His story reads like a Hollywood script, a tale of daring escapes, corrupt officials, and a global network of traffickers, assassins, and money launderers. Twice he managed to break free from maximum security facilities in Mexico, once reportedly hidden in a laundry cart, the other through a mile-long tunnel dug right into his cell. His capture in 2016, after a shootout with Mexican Marines, marked the end of an era. Extradited to the United States, he was sentenced to life in prison, his empire dismantled, his legend finally laid to rest.
The sun-drenched hills of 1960s California, a place often associated with peace, love, and the counterculture movement, became the backdrop for a series of gruesome murders that shocked the world. At the center of this darkness was Charles Manson, a charismatic cult leader with a hypnotic hold over his followers, a man who orchestrated one of the most infamous crimes in American history. Manson, a career criminal with a history of petty theft and manipulation, reinvented himself as a spiritual guru, attracting a group of lost and vulnerable young people to his so-called Manson family. In August 1969, Manson ordered his followers to commit a series of murders in Los Angeles, targeting wealthy and prominent individuals. The most infamous of these was the brutal killing of actress Sharon Tate and her friends at her home in Benedict Canyon. Despite not directly participating in the murders, he was found guilty of conspiracy and sentenced to death, later commuted to life in prison.
Behind a charming smile and an engaging personality lurked a monster. Ted Bundy, with his boyish good looks and disarming demeanor, shattered the myth of the monstrous criminal, proving that evil can often wear the most innocuous of masks. He became one of America's most prolific serial killers, preying on young women across multiple states during the 1970s. Bundy's crimes were as horrific as they were brazen. He would often approach his victims in public places, feigning injury or impersonating authority figures to gain their trust. His crimes were not merely acts of violence but displays of depravity, his victims often subjected to torture and mutilation after their deaths. His intelligence and cunning allowed him to evade capture for years, even escaping from custody on 2 occasions. In the end, Bundy confessed to over 30 murders, although the true extent of his crimes may never be known. He was executed in Florida in 1989, his death met with a sense of relief and a lingering unease. Chapter 7. John Gotti, the Dapper Don. The streets of New York City have long been a battleground for power and influence, where organized crime families have held a shadowy grip on everything from labor unions to political circles. Gotti, with his expensive suits, slick-back hair, and penchant for publicity, became a media darling, a stark contrast to the secretive, shadowy figures who typically occupied the highest echelons of organized crime. He orchestrated the assassination of his predecessor, Paul Castellano, a brazen power grab that sent shockwaves through the underworld and law enforcement alike. The FBI, frustrated by Gotti's ability to evade conviction, planted a bug in his headquarters, capturing his conversations and ultimately providing the evidence they needed to dismantle his empire. He was convicted in 1992 on multiple counts of racketeering and murder and sentenced to life in prison. Chapter 8. Adolf Hitler, the Shadow of Hate. The world stood on the precipice of chaos. The year was 1939, and Europe teetered on the brink of war. From the ashes of a defeated Germany, a nation wounded by economic depression and political instability, a charismatic and deeply disturbed individual had risen to power. His name was Adolf Hitler, and his ideology of hate would plunge the world into the deadliest conflict in human history. Hitler's rise to power was fueled by a potent cocktail of resentment, nationalist fervor, and a twisted ideology that preached the superiority of the Aryan race and the evils of communism and Judaism. His Nazi party, with its chilling symbols and paramilitary organizations, quickly gained power, exploiting fear and uncertainty to silence opposition and consolidate their grip on the levers of government. His suicide in the ruins of Berlin marked the end of the war, but left behind a legacy of pain, loss, and a profound sense of responsibility to ensure that such horrors are never repeated. Chapter 9. Ayman al-Zawahiri, the Doctor of Terror. In the wake of the September 11th attacks, one name emerged from the shadows: Ayman al-Zawahiri. A trained surgeon and Islamic scholar, al-Zawahiri was the intellectual architect of al-Qaeda. Born into a prominent Egyptian family, he seemed an unlikely candidate for terrorism. His path was shaped by radical ideology and a deep-seated hatred of the West. He joined the Egyptian Islamic Jihad, aiming to establish an Islamic state. After bin Laden's death, al-Zawahiri assumed leadership of al-Qaeda. His reign ended in 2022 when he was killed in a U.S. drone strike in Kabul. Chapter 10. Whitey Bulger, the Winter Hill Gang and the Shadow of Betrayal. The streets of Boston, a city steeped in history and tradition, harbor a darker side, a history of organized crime that stretches back generations. Bulger's story is a complex tapestry of loyalty, betrayal, and the blurred lines between law enforcement and organized crime. He rose from the rough streets of South Boston, his criminal career beginning with petty theft and escalating to bank robbery, extortion, and murder. He was a master manipulator, cultivating an image of himself as a Robin Hood figure, protecting his neighborhood while ruthlessly eliminating his rivals. However, Bulger's most audacious move was his secret alliance with the FBI. He became an informant, providing information on his rivals in the Italian Mafia, the Patriarca crime family, in exchange for protection from prosecution. His capture in 2011, living in a modest apartment in Santa Monica, California, brought an end to his decades-long reign of terror. These 10 individuals, each with their own motivations and methods, have left an indelible mark on the world. Their stories serve as cautionary tales, reminding us of the fragility of peace, the importance of justice, and the need for vigilance in safeguarding the values that bind us together. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the heart of darkness.